Hello, ghouls. Welcome to Season 2, Episode 7 of the Shrouded in Darkness podcast, where we shine a light on the cases that the world forgot. I'm your true crime-obsessed host, Marlena. Let's start the show with our sources for today. We have Wikipedia, All That's Interesting, People.com, Murderpedia, and News for JAX. Today's case takes us to multiple states across the U.S., with a serial killer known as the Casanova Killer, nicknamed this because of his charm and devilish good looks. Allow me to introduce you to Paul John Knowles. Born April 25, 1946 in Orlando, Florida. Abandoned by his father at an early age, Paul spent much of his childhood in and out of foster homes and facilities. At 19 years old, Paul was incarcerated for the first time, and this behavior would continue through his life. Burglary, vehicle theft, in and out of Florida prisons. We move along to early 1974, so this would have been when Paul was about to turn 28, and he's again in a Florida prison. He becomes pen pals with someone named Angela Kovic, who was from San Francisco. Their relationship blossomed, and they become engaged. Angela even pays for Paul's legal counsel. When he's released, he flies straight to California to be with her. Only, she's now called off the wedding. Apparently, a psychic warned her of impending doom. So, Paul reluctantly returns to Florida. Sometime later, his petty crimes escalate when he stabs a bartender during a fight. After being arrested, Paul was able to escape his cell by picking the lock. Now we're on July 26th of that same year. Alice Curtis was a 65-year-old retired school teacher living in Jacksonville, Florida. The night that Paul escaped from jail, he broke into Alice's home. He bound and gagged her, ransacked her house, stole her money, stole her car. She choked on the gag that he left, making her his first murdered victim. Continuing in Jacksonville, it's August 1st, 1974. Lillian Annette Anderson was 11 years old, and her sister, Mylette Josephine, was only 7. They were home alone while their mother made a quick trip to check on a sick relative. Paul, still in Alice's car, was trying to find a quiet street to ditch it. He saw the 2 small children and was convinced they recognized him in the stolen vehicle. Fearing they would alert the police, he kidnaps them, strangles them, and leaves their innocent, lifeless bodies in a swamp outside town. Technically, this case is deemed as unsolved. While Paul confessed to murdering the 2 sisters, their bodies were never found, and he was never officially linked to their case. Our next known victim is 49-year-old Marjorie Howe. Paul broke into her Atlantic Beach home and strangled her with her own nylon stocking. While there, he stole her television set and possibly her husband's guns. There's kind of mixed opinions on that part. Now it's August 23rd, and we're in Crawford County, Georgia. We meet Kathy Sue Pierce, a 24-year-old mother. Paul forced himself into her home and strangled her with a telephone cord. There with her was her 3-year-old son, but thankfully, he was unharmed during the incident. William Vernon Bates was a 32-year-old businessman from Lima, Ohio. Could also be pronounced Lima, Ohio. On September 3rd, after meeting William and sharing drinks at a local tavern, Paul strangles him. William's naked body was found nearby in a wooded area later on in November. Paul stole his vehicle, his money, and his credit cards. September 18th, we're at a rest stop near Ely, Nevada. Lois Mildred Johnson, 59, and her husband, Emmett Alexander Johnson, 62, were on a camping trip when they became victims of the Casanova Killer. They are both bound and shot. On September 23rd, Paul meets Ann Jean Dawson, a 49-year-old beautician from Birmingham, Alabama. They travel together for a few days, and it seems Ann pays for their expenses along the way. Then, on the 29th, so 6 days later, he kills her. There was one Jane Doe that was a part of Paul's victim list. She was later identified as Ima Jean Sanders. She was a 13-year-old hitchhiker that Paul raped and strangled in Florida. We move on to October of that same year. Paul continues his traveling through more states: Oklahoma, Missouri, Iowa, Minnesota, Virginia. It was October 16th when he needed his fix. Karen Wine was 35 years old, at home with her 16-year-old daughter, Dawn. Paul bound, raped, and strangled them both in their Marlborough, Connecticut home. Next, we meet Doris Hovey, a 53-year-old living in Woodford, Virginia. Like so many other victims, Paul broke into her home just after his attack in Connecticut. He used Doris's husband's rifle, wiped it free of fingerprints, and left it by her body. There appeared to be no burglary, no rape, no real motive for Paul to take this woman's life. Around this time, Paul was driving William's vehicle. Remember, this was the man that he killed back in Ohio in early September. He picks up 2 unnamed hitchhikers in Key West, but was stopped by a police officer for traffic violations. The officer let him go with only a warning, but the experience unnerved Paul so much that he just let the hitchhikers go. Paul eventually reaches out to his attorney, Sheldon Yavitz, still unnerved by his close call with the police. Sheldon suggests Paul turn himself in, but that wasn't part of Paul's agenda. Instead, he opted to mail confession tapes to his attorney as he continued his joyride. In those cassette tapes, Paul brags about the murders he committed. We move on to November 2nd. Paul picks up Georgia hitchhikers Edward Hilliard, age 23, and Debbie Griffin, age 20, in Macon, Georgia. They soon meet their demise like so many others. November 6th, Paul befriends Carswell Carr, also in Macon, and was invited to his home to spend the night. They share a few drinks, and then Paul stabs the 45-year-old with scissors. He then strangles Carswell's 15-year-old daughter, Amanda Beth. He steals credit cards, clothes, and a watch. Sadly, it was Amanda's mother that found the gruesome scene when she returned home from her night shift as a nurse. On November 8th, while in Atlanta, Paul meets Sandy Fox. She was a 45-year-old British journalist and one of the few that survived meeting Paul. They spent 3 days together, Sandy completely oblivious to who she was with. An added note, Paul was going by the alias Daryl Golden at this time. Sandy would eventually write a book detailing her experience with a serial killer, titled Natural Born Killer: In Love and on the Road with a Serial Killer. She would describe Paul as a very charming and handsome man, which goes along with his nickname, the Casanova Killer. November 13th, Paul attempts to rape Susan McKenzie, who was an acquaintance of Sandy. He holds her at gunpoint, but she manages to escape and notifies police. Paul gets away thanks to the sawed-off shotgun he carelessly displays. This is when he retreats to West Palm Beach, Florida. There, he breaks into a home and kidnaps Barbara Maybe Abel, using her vehicle for the getaway. They spend a few days together, and according to her interview with People, Barbara survives because she charms Paul. She acts interested in him. Plus, she is a radio copywriter and offers to tell a story. Aside from raping her, Paul lets her leave. Shortly after this, he is spotted by a police officer that recognizes the stolen vehicle. But Paul is too quick with his gun, and the officer becomes his new hostage. Charles Eugene Campbell of the Florida Highway Patrol. Paul and his new hostage drive away in the patrol car, which he would later use to confiscate yet another vehicle. This time, the vehicle owner is businessman James Meyer, a 29-year-old from Wilmington, Delaware. He takes James hostage, and the three of them now travel to Pulaski, Georgia, where both men are handcuffed to a tree and fatally shot in the head, execution style. It's November 17th, Henry County, Georgia. Paul encounters a police barricade. He tries to escape in his vehicle, only to lose control and crash into a tree. Now, it's a foot chase. Only Paul gets cornered by David Clark, a Vietnam veteran that's holding the serial killer at gunpoint, waiting for the police to catch up. Paul is arrested and taken into custody, finally. Only, Paul isn't giving up. It's December 18th. He is being transferred by vehicle to a maximum security location. Paul manages to break out of his handcuffs and attempts to get the sheriff's gun from his holster. Thankfully, they're not alone. FBI agent Ron Angel is also in the vehicle, sees what's happening, and shoots Paul in the chest 3 times, killing him almost instantly. There were at least 18 murders directly linked to the Casanova Killer. It was suspected there could have been many more. Paul claimed he killed at least 35 people, but the true count may never be known. Before I wrap up this week's case, here are some interesting facts I found about our Casanova Killer. I mentioned a couple survivors in this case, both Sandy Fox and Barbara Maybe Abel. Both women work in the media industry and could help make Paul famous, which was ultimately his goal. Investigators strongly believe this is the reason the women were allowed to live. Paul Knowles was a very unique serial killer. He didn't really have an MO. There were no routines for him, no common victims, no patterns. He killed people of different ages, different genders, from different states, different backgrounds. He even used different weapons, more of an opportunity kind of killer. Maybe this was his way of not getting caught. He would keep the police guessing by never committing the same crime twice. The whole case is such a bizarre one. There's no rhyme, no reason, nothing to show why he was the Casanova Killer. It was just brutal killings from kids, teenagers, men, women. No one was safe. Part of me wishes that he could have suffered in prison, that the families of the victims could see him go through a trial, to get that punishment. But also, he had already gotten away and escaped before, so I worry he could have done that again. I mean, he was literally trying it again. So maybe in the end, it was a good thing that Agent Angel shot and killed him. Maybe one day we'll have resolution for those other victims. 35 is a ridiculously high number, especially when we only have 18 names. Those families deserve closure too. They all deserve to know what happened to their family. I'd love to hear from you if you have any details worth sharing, or maybe you have your own theory. You can connect with us on Instagram and WordPress. Just search for the Shrouded in Darkness podcast. As always, thank you for listening. And if there's a case from your hometown that deserves attention, send it to us. We love learning about new cases and sharing the facts and names that are important. Tune in next week as we dive into the insane unsolved case surrounding Ellen Greenberg. Until next time, ghouls, remember, the truth is always hiding in the darkness.